Hola, muy buenos días. Hello, everybody. My name is Rafael Fernández de Castro. I'm the director of the Center for U.S. Mexican Studies and professor at UC San Diego. And I welcome you to this webinar about Trump 2.0 and his threats to Mexico. I'm very happy to do this with COMEXI. And here is the new president of COMEXI, Héctor Cárdenas. Héctor, I'm so happy and very glad that we continue to do this. And I know that this webinar is gathering a lot of attention. Héctor Cárdenas, welcome, and welcome to COMEXI. You're the new president of COMEXI, and I know that you're going to do wonderful things at COMEXI. Bienvenido, Héctor. Adelante.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Muchas gracias. Welcome, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to be able to kick the year off with this fantastic panel discussion. Thank you, Rafael, for organizing it, and thank you very much for all our wonderful panelists for agreeing to be on this very important panel at a very important time in the history of both the United States and Mexico. And I'm sure that we're going to have a very interesting and vivacious discussion today. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass it over to Rebecca Bill Chavez from the Inter-American Dialogue, who's going to be our wonderful moderator. And again, thank you for everybody who's attending. Muchas gracias. Feliz Año Nuevo. And let's kick it off.
Beautiful.
Great. Thank you so much, Héctor and Rafael, for the invitation to moderate this panel. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So I think what we're all tracking, and we're very curious to see what Trump 2.0 has in store for U.S.-Mexico relations. And as we look ahead, it's really vital that we assess how this next administration or how this next chapter could influence the deep and multifaceted ties between our two countries, from trade and energy cooperation to migration policy and border security. The relationship faces opportunities for collaboration, but also significant risks of friction. President Claudia Sheinbaum's leadership offers a fresh perspective on how Mexico might approach these challenges. So how the relationship, of course, evolves is going to have far-reaching implications, not only for the US and Mexico, but for the entire hemisphere. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking these issues with our panelists. And we are so lucky to be joined by Beth Sheridan, who I'm sure you have all read her stories. Beth Sheridan, of course, is at the Washington Post, where she's the Mexico City Bureau Chief. We have also, of course, Congresswoman Claudia Ruiz Massieu, who joined Congress in 2024, but she's had a long trajectory in government before that. When she was in the Senate, she chaired the Special Committee on USMCA implementation, and she has served in the cabinet, both as Minister of Foreign Affairs and also Minister of Tourism. And finally, we already had the chance to hear from Rafael, but Rafael is the director of the Center for U.S.-Mexico Studies at UCSD and is the co-organizer along with COMEXI of today's event. So let's just dive right in. My first question, and by the way, before I go any further, as Rafael mentioned, we really want this to be a conversation. And so I have a number of questions to ask. Then we're going to open it up to the audience. So if you want to start thinking of your questions and dropping them into the question and answer box, that would be wonderful. So my first question, and this is before turning to Mexico, is what do you see as Trump's greatest domestic challenges? And of course, these are no doubt going to set the tone for his engagement with Mexico and for the rest of the hemisphere. Why don't we start with you, Claudia, on this first question?
Thank you, Rebecca. I think his first and foremost challenge will be to deliver according to the expectations that his election by, well, not so much a wide, big margin, but the fact that he won both houses of Congress and the popular vote, as well as, of course, the electoral vote, with a very, I think, clear agenda on many points that largely are the same points that drove his agenda that in 2016 and 2020, He does it again in 2024. And I think there's an expectation of how quickly he can deliver on that agenda, on immigration, on trade, tariffs, on American involvement with the rest of the world and the ongoing conflicts going on, and of course on security and drugs related issues. So I think he's going to be very keen on delivering as soon as he can. And in fact, I have to say, if we're being honest, I think it's remarkable that he didn't wait to be sworn in, but most astoundingly, neither did the rest of the world. Everybody started treating him as a president in office from November, and countries started making concessions before even formally, dealing with a president in office, and institutional negotiations beginning on any issue. So countries started and leaders started making concessions and effectively adjusting their policies and their decisions to the agenda President-elect Trump has set since November and even before that. So I think he's going to make sure that that trend continues, that dynamic continues, and he's going to be very keen from the first day with his executive orders to make sure to send the message that he's going to be delivering on every issue, regardless of the scope of those measures that he takes. I think that's going to be his first priority, and to show that he's stronger than before, more effective than before, and he gets the results, where he wants and how he wants it.
Thank you so much. Your point about delivering is an important one, and also about this unprecedented activity before he even assumes the presidency. Mary Beth, would you like to answer that question too? And then Rafael?
Yeah, I actually think there's a lot of interrelation between his domestic policies actually and Mexico. And some of the challenges are going to be if he does, in fact, manage to carry out, for example, sweeping deportations, which is a bit of a question mark because of resource constraints. But I do think, the economic challenge will be big. And if there's already obviously shortages of labor in different areas of the U.S. economy. If those are exacerbated, that could be problematic. The tariffs could have quite a shock, and as you know, could contribute to inflation going up. So I do see, on the one hand, the economic challenges he's going to face, including with the stock market. He wants to cut taxes. Not totally clear to me how he's going to find the money to do those things. So I think the economy is a bit of a question mark. And then I think the U.S. is in for a very different foreign policy situation if there's ties with NATO that are not as strong, if ties with Russia are stronger. I think there's a lot of questions on the security front and how that's going to play out.
Rebecca, before I tell you what I think about the domestic challenges of Trump, I want to say that I'm very happy, Claudia. I just find out that you're teaching at ITAM, and I love that. I was a professor at ITAM for 23 years, so thank you. Welcome to ITAM, Claudia, and I know that you're going to make a difference with the students. And Mary Beth, I must say that I've enjoyed your articles a lot. That article that you wrote about Francisco Villa. You really, you know Mexico well, and thank you for going and meet the Mexican people and let Americans and us know what is the feeling out there in the communities of what is going on. Thank you. You're doing a beautiful job there. My take, Rebecca, it's like, I believe Trump 2.0, he's obviously more experienced. That's why he's in a hurry. He knows he has very little time. So nowadays he's trying to have, I believe he has more than 1,000 people already appointed. When Trump took office 8 years ago, he had only appointed like 30 people. So there's a big difference nowadays. Second, he's much more powerful, and he has the three branches of government aligned with Republicans. That is really making a difference. And finally, and this is very important, he's more vengeful. He's all about settling accounts, especially with the so-called deep state. So that's why he, for example, he's putting this Kash Patel as director of the FBI. And we know that Kash Patel is someone who is a truly yes man. Every single in the cabinet, every single there, they're very loyal to Trump. That's the number one characteristic of Trump's appointees. So we'll see, but I believe he wants to settle accounts. I believe that he sees the state as helping Trump, not helping the American people. So we'll see how he goes. And so I believe there's a few people like Elon Musk and his own son, Don Jr., who are very powerful. I see Elon Musk as a very powerful man and someone who is intruding not only in domestic issues, but in international affairs. So we'll see, because there's some jealousy out there. Stephen Bannon is already fighting to Elon Musk. And so we'll see what happened there. But again, he's more experienced, he's more painful, and we'll see what will happen. And I would not want to talk to Mexico, not about foreign affairs, but domestically he has lots of challenges because the expectation is enormous for him to bring change. And yes, he ran on this platform, and everybody's expecting that he basically transforms the U.S. economy, which will not be easy.
Thank you, Rafael. It's your point about unified government, of course, is very important when it comes to what Claudia's point about delivering. So I want to I really want to focus on Mexico, but I have one more kind of broader question to frame the conversation, and it's about his broader foreign policy priorities, which Mary Beth alluded to. So on the global stage, Trump's first administration was defined by this America's First agenda. And it included trade renegotiations, which Claudia was involved in, of course, reshaping alliances, and also withdrawing from multilateral agreements. So as he returns to office, and we're thinking about potential differences between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0, what do you think will dominate his foreign policy agenda? And Mary Beth, I'm going to turn to you first on this one, in light of your recent reporting on China and Mexico.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the differences this time around with Trump is that his foreign policy is very knit to this idea of sort of refashioning the American economy, reviving manufacturing, for example. And so when you look at something like tariffs in his first term, he did use the threat of tariffs, of course, to win concessions, say, from Mexico on immigration, right? Whereas this time he is talking about global tariffs and he sees tariffs both, I think, as a way to revive manufacturing in the United States, but also as a source of income. So, in Mexico, I think there's a sort of idea that, well, we dealt with the Trump threat of tariffs the first time around, and we negotiated a solution, and we'll do the same. But I think it's a fairly fundamental shift to look at tariffs as an income stream for the country. And it means that the negotiating space is going to be smaller, I think. I also think when we're talking about global tariffs, that will hit potentially, countries all over the world. So that could, the shift in trade patterns or commerce could be quite something. I do think China will be an even bigger, issue right now. And I think it's interesting, with Mexico, there's a sort of a bit of alarmism, I would say, about growing Chinese investment in Mexico. I think one of the issues that is going to be a big one is the commercial aspect. In other words, China both has overproduction of a lot of products and can sell them very cheaply, can essentially put sectors out of business around the world. I think that's a real concern. I also think, particularly with cars, China's incredibly advances in the EV side is a source of concern, both in terms of, the Chinese companies get a lot of subsidies, they can move in and really take big chunks of foreign markets and come to dominate that industry worldwide. There's security concerns. So anyway, I do think, you know, on the one hand, there's a bit of alarmism, I would argue, in Mexico about the Chinese influence here, but there are real things going on, and I think for Trump that's going to be huge.
Thank you. Former minister, when we think about foreign policy priorities, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think we're definitely going to see a very tangible shift of American foreign policy in terms of what we were used to since the end of the Second World War. There's going to definitely be a sort of a pullback by the United States from traditional alliances, multilateral institutions, and generally sort of very, very tangibly, I think, prioritizing American interests by pulling back from all this role that the U.S. has had as the guardian of a multilateral system, the rules-based order. And we see this in and not only because has been saying that he's ready to pull back from NATO, he's ready to I don't know, force some solutions to ongoing conflicts. Everyone is taking him seriously on these statements. We see NATO members talking about increasing their own spending, anticipating the U.S., keeping up with President Trump's threat to pull back if they don't amp their contributions. We see, the ceasefire agreement that, even though it was the Biden administration that largely crafted it, I think undeniably that in some way the Trump team participated, or maybe only if we're informed. But it is sort of a win before entering that sort of underscores what he's been saying. I'm willing to change the parameters of American involvement in the multilateral system, in ongoing conflicts, in the way we participate in our alliances, traditional alliances. And I'm willing to do that because I have very clearly in mind what the American people need and want, whether it is regarding trade or the economy. And I agree with Mary Beth that a lot of question marks regarding his economy objectives, his security objectives, and how he's going to go about that. But in the meantime, I think all these other, not posturing, because he really is willing to sort of to make what he says, to make it happen. But he's going to be using these two things, what's difficult to do in terms of the economy, but he's not going to hesitate to go further than the U.S. has gone before in terms of, yes, I'm willing to pull back, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to say something that I think it's an example of this. This tradition of not inviting foreign heads of state or government to the inauguration, that it has changed, and that he deliberately invited certain kind of world leaders or country leaders to his inauguration. I think it's also part of this new, the new way that President Trump and as President of the United States is going to be acting on the world stage. He assumes he's a leader also of not only a global, he reflects a global trend, but he's a leader of like-minded countries or leaders. And he's going to juxtapose that to the other group of strong, not allies in the traditional sense, but maybe allies by interest that are Russia, Iran, China, of course. He had a phone call with President Xi, and I think that's also the sort of thing we're going to be seeing, how he sees himself as a kind of leader that represents certain kind of values, as opposed to other leaders that are America's adversaries, and he's not going to be shy about putting everything on the table, whether it is not funding NATO or insisting for the resolution of the Ukraine war, for example. So everything's going to change, and I think everything is going to be different from what we were used to expect before.
Thank you. And just as a reminder for those who are tracking, kind of following up with what Claudia said, some of the presidents who will be here are, well, Viktor Orban is of course of Hungary, Meloni from Italy, Netanyahu will be here, and then from the region, Latin America, we have Javier Milei of Argentina, Nayib Bukele, El Salvador, Noboa from Ecuador, election in Ecuador on February 9th, and Santiago Peña of Paraguay. Okay, so I would love to hear your thoughts on this question, Rafael. I know you've been thinking about this.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well, I believe the #1 priority is China for the US, and this goes beyond Trump. I mean, the only consensus, foreign policy consensus in the US is that China has become the top competitor. I really see the world evolving into this bipolar world. Is China and the US, and there's a strategic competition. There's not only economic competition, so that's #1. Then I believe that Trump is all over the place, and he's more savvy, more experienced, but on this, he's been showing that he's all over the place. He's talking about Panama. I want back the Panama Canal, and he's talking about Greenland. So he's fighting the Denmarks. He's basically been very rude, extremely rude with Canadians, talking about the 51st new US state. And of course, he's fighting Iran. So I believe Mexico is not alone. On that, I believe that those are good news for Mexico. He's all over the place. It's not only about Mexico, it's about everybody. So I believe, Rebecca, that when someone has more than 1 or 2 priorities, then you don't have priorities. So I believe he's diluting himself. He's opening a lot of fronts. And although his foreign policy team is, I mean, we can say that Marco Rubio already confirmed the incoming Secretary of State. I mean, he's a hawk, but he's a professional hawk. And so we'll see. But I believe that he's all over the place. He's creating chaos, and on that, those are very good news for Mexico, because then it's not only about Mexico, it's about everybody's. It's Trump's enemy, and we're in company. We have a lot of people. So I believe we really have. This is a good time for Mexico to reach out to Canada, and because just Trump, it's everywhere, and I just said, and this is a little bit contradictory, that he's more experienced, but Trump continues to be Trump, and he basically says whatever he just saw or watched on TV, and so we'll see. It will be fascinating, and I will end this by saying that he hates multilateralism, and I believe that when we have this revision of the USMCA, he might want to do it Canada and Mexico. He doesn't like to deal with 2 countries at the same time, because he believes that people or nations group against the US, and so he really hates multilateralism, because he sees this grouping of countries as coming against the US. I'll stop here. I know there's a lot of questions coming. I'm glad that everybody started to send their questions and the comments.
Well, that you provided a great segue into the focus on Mexico here. So let's dig into the issues that are encapsulated in the title of today's event, Trump 2.0 Threats to Mexico. So we all know that during Trump's first term, Mexico often found itself caught in the crosshairs, right, of contentious U.S. policies. And this included the border wall, immigration restrictions, and the threats of tariffs, which have already been alluded to. So looking forward, can we expect changes? What changes can we expect in Trump 2.0? What specific policies or actions under a second Trump administration could pose risks to Mexico? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. And actually, let's go. Let's actually go straight to you, Rafael, on this one.
Okay, I mean, it's very clear. He has threatened Mexico 3 ways. Number one, massive deportations, and I believe he has a dream team to do that. He has Stephen Miller, he has Tom Homatz, the border SAR, so they're ready to do it. Won't be easy, but I believe he'll put it a show, and there's going to be a lot of suffering in the immigrant community in the U.S. There's already people coming back, and yes, we're getting ready, but I'll talk about that. So one, it's deportations, and I will say, Rebecca and Mary, Beth and Claudia, I mean, he's back in the White House because of this very erratic Biden policy on the U.S.-Mexico border. About 5 million people entered the U.S.-Mexico border during the Biden and Kamala 4 years. So he wants to put a stop to that, and he's going to be very forceful on that. No doubt on that. Second is about fentanyl, about security. And so we're very worried because every single presidential candidate in the Republican Party, they were talking about doing something unilaterally against the Mexican cartels. And we all know that they're going to name the Mexican cartels international organizations, I'm missing the word.
I think it's terrorist organizations.
Terrorist
right?
organization. Thank you, Maribeth. And so that way, that will facilitate Washington to attack a Mexican cartel, and that's very worrisome because that would really, I would say, cross a red line in the friendship, in the partnership between Mexico and the U.S. That would be devastating for the relationship and devastating for North America. And finally, it's about the USMCA. We have the revision of the USMCA next year, and this is paramount for Mexico. Why is this paramount? Because thanks to the USMCA, Mexico nowadays is the #1 U.S. trade partner. So that gives us more leverage with the U.S., but not easy, even though the USMCA, he has said that this is a very good agreement because that's the way he negotiated. I believe that Trump is someone hard to understand. He's volatile, and I'll stop here. Those are the threats, and then I'll be very pleased to try to share with you what I believe that Mexico should be doing.
Great. Thank you. So Mary Beth and Claudia, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. What are the threats? Do you agree? Are there additional ones that you see?
I mean, I guess I would just say that in the first term, the overwhelming emphasis was on migration. So the issue that Mexico had to grapple with Trump was Mexico willing and able to take steps to slow migration? And Mexico, as we know, did quite a lot of things from slowing the flow of migrants to accepting migrants for the Wait in Mexico program. I would just say it's a much broader agenda this time on the Trump side. And I would say, obviously migration will be just as important as it was presumably last time. But I think that, as I mentioned before, the tariffs are now more than a bargaining tool. They're, to me, a total Trump change of paradigm so that he sees them as a source of income, as he talks about countries making money off the U.S. and so on. And then the last thing I would say is, while the drug issue existed certainly in his first term, it was a much lower priority. But having said that, as we know, he talked to his senior military officials about, what about having a rocket attack on drug labs and so on. I do think this time it's a much higher priority, and it is a much more dangerous situation for Mexico, as Rafael pointed out, because I think there's a willingness to take unilateral action.
I would pick up on that. I totally agree. I think what we're seeing on this, we'll be seeing on this administration that's a little bit different from the previous one. Well, it's a broader agenda, but the topics are there. I think we're going to see one big difference is the people he picked to integrate his cabinet. They are many of them are much more experienced, and they are totally in agreement with President Trump's views on migration, trade, and security issues. So we're going to see, I think, a much more compact government, top-level officials surrounding President Trump, and they're not going to question him as many of his former cabinet members did. He has almost no checks in Congress, none whatsoever in the House, and probably not very many in the Senate. So he can also seek to use a much more aggressive approach, for example, or take unilateral measures and not have Congress try to, check him or sort of counterbalance him. And I think he also has much more support in not only within the American people, but in border counties, in all states, I think. And I think that when it comes to immigration, it's always made a difference how local governments, participate or not within the specific, for example, limiting or deportation policies the government seeks to undertake. So if we see much more support in specific local and county governments, I think that's going to make a difference. Regardless of how what the scale is of, for example, deportation actions that the government takes, any measures, showy measures, make a difference and have an impact and have a consequence on how people react, on the fear they instill. And again, I think we have to separate reality and how the consequences will ultimately affect. For example, if we talk about immigration, mass deportations, of course, we know there are sectors in the American economy that are going to suffer. And the same with tariffs. We know that ultimately the consumers are going to feel the consequences. But the immediate impact of the measures, I think, are going to be felt more by Mexico. I mean, that's a reality as well. And one final thing, he finds a very institutionally weakened Mexico, I think, and that's also going to make a difference. And I think Mexico is preparing and should be preparing to face this. It's our diminished capabilities on many fronts, and the willingness of the U.S. to take unilateral actions, showy measures that will force us to react, hopefully not without forethought and thinking on the mid and long term. But I think the risk for Mexico is unilateral measures, greater support in all fronts for President Trump, and weakened institutional capabilities that the Mexican government has.
Thank you. That's the perfect. We have multiple questions in the Q&A about that touch on your last point about Mexico's ability to respond, or how can Mexico respond. So kind of tying it into the questions that I'm seeing from the audience. Claudia Sheinbaum, of course, has assumed the presidency at this really pivotal moment for Mexico. And she faces a lot of challenges of navigating this potentially, as you've described, all of you've described, this very potentially volatile relationship with the United States. So how well is her administration prepared to address these challenges? What tools do you think that she has and the administration has? And do you think she has shown, I know it's been a short time, but Claudia, your point early on about that there's already been a flurry of activity and the inauguration hasn't even happened. So in this short time, do you think she's shown the diplomatic skill and the foresight, the strategic foresight needed to manage these tensions effectively? And it's tough. We all know that. So Claudia, I'm going to turn to you first on this one about, and not just the assessment, I guess, but also what tools does Mexico have? What sort of policy options are there?
I think President Sheinbaum started, her first reactions to the first, on the first days after the election, tried from my point of view, tried to emulate what President Obrador did during his term, sort of playing it down and using her daily news conference to sort of engage or respond to President Trump's comments or threats or policy positions. And I think she did so with different rates of success. Better when she talked about responding to the Gulf of America and Mexican America. I think that was points for her. But generally speaking, I think she's found that engaging directly as president with whatever President Trump says every day or tweets or whatever, I think that's not as effective. And I think she's been de-escalating that sort of reaction, and she's been I think trying to sort of shore up the strengths that Mexico has. What do we have? And I think she's been using that pretty effectively. For example, the largest consular network in the United States. So she made a point of really showing, saying, giving instructions to the consuls in Mexico earlier this month, and saying we're going to use our consulates in a very proactive way. We know what's coming. We're there. We're making partnerships with legal clinics, lawyers, and we're prepared to defend our community in the United States, sending a good message of, I know that we have to face these deportation threats with the strengths that we have as a country. She has announced a couple of measures and a much more larger in scope plan of industrialization, the Mexico plan, and making a point of showing that she's working with the private sector to prepare for what may be the first wave of tariffs, but to prepare for the USMCA revision in 2026, showing that she understands that this is going to be an effort that requires not only the government, but other actors as well, particularly the private sector. And she's also, I think, less vocally or specifically talking about it, but it is a shift that's been felt in Mexico in another area, and that is security. I think she has given a lot of much more powers to the new Secretary of Security, and the strategy that the government has been implementing in specific states, particularly Sinaloa, and the strategy that the government has been communicating in terms of dismantling fentanyl labs and this kind arresting people and dismantling organized crime cells is part of what she knows is also going to be on the table. Mexico needs to have or show better results in terms of fentanyl drugs, organized crime expansion, so as to preempt other measures in the United States. So I think Mexico does have strengths in its diplomatic core and consular network, in its expertise working with the private sector when in negotiations on trade agreements, particularly with the U.S. and Canada, and they are sort of, flexing that muscle and starting to work out a comprehensive strategy. And also, she's showing a very pragmatic reaction and understanding of reality. Security is going to be a very big part of our new engagement with the new administration. She understands this, and she's prepared to play that card as well. One final point is diversifying also what Mexico is doing in terms of trying to accelerate other trade agreements and relationships with other countries. It was announced today that the negotiations for the modernization of our global agreement with the European Union has finalized. Of course, there's still ratification process that needs to be completed, but it was announced today, and it was announced today also in terms of this is also Mexico preparing for this new world that we're going to be seeing. Of course, USMCA is important. The US is our most important partner, but we are willing to go in a tit-for-tat tariff strategy. If that's the way, we're going to be preparing for the revision of 2026, but we're also not putting all our eggs on the same basket.
Claudia, thank you. And that we actually have a question that's very related to this what we're discussing right now, and it's from Ambassador Wayne. And so Mary Beth and Rafael. So the Ambassador Wayne's question is, and it's like I said, it's kind of building on your answer, Claudia, is what do you think the top 3 priorities should be for Sheinbaum to get bilateral relations moving with Trump, with the Trump administration?
So, I mean, I think, yeah, this is a bit connected to the last one. I do think when you look at the sort of practical things that could make a difference, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch Garcia Harfuch, the new Secretary of Security. My own sense is that the Trump team does not have a very sophisticated idea of the problems of security in Mexico. Garcia Harfuch not only is a lifelong, security official, a pro, who's taking a harder line, frankly, than the previous government. But quite honestly, I could definitely see him appealing to the Trump people because he, like Trump, has a certain charisma, a certain ability to project sort of toughness, and he's handsome. They call him Batman. I mean, I just see him as being a guy who could be an interlocutor there. I do think one of the things that's going to be super interesting to see also is one of the presumably potential very important allies for the Mexican government is the U.S. business community. And so I think since they will be feeling the effects of tariffs, since they're so interwoven, particularly manufacturing and agriculture, with Mexico, they themselves will be hurt. So I think it'll be an interesting thing to watch what sort of alliances emerge there between the Mexican government and the U.S. business community.
Rebecca, I believe we have to, we have to overtake Trump. We know what he wants. He wants zero migration coming to the border. So I believe Mexico badly needs an orderly Mexico in terms of migrants coming through Mexico. So yes, we have to order the territory. We have to make sure that people enter legally in our southern border. We have to have better borders and order migration flows. And we all want legal and safe migration flows, so we should really shoot for that. Mary Beth and Claudia, they talk a lot about already. We have to do a lot on fentanyl. Just imagine For 5 years, López Obrador kept on denying that fentanyl was produced in Mexico. So that drove crazy a lot of Americans. That really annoyed a lot of Americans. So we're paying for that. So in that, Claudia Sheinbaum is not an easy position. I know Garcia Harfuch is trying hard. And of course, it's not about hoax. He's about guns. And he's been very tough with organized crime, but we'll see. But my take, Rebecca, on this is we deal with Trump 1.0. He had 3 threats to Mexico. So I believe Mexico cannot prevent deportation for Trump. We can basically ease migrants or facilitate migrants coming back or deportees to come back. And we have to do a lot of stuff that I don't see we're doing it. De La Fuente, he's trying hard. But I don't see new money in the consulates to hire new lawyers. So, I mean, if this is a priority, we must use new resources and really improve, I would say, the potential of the consulates, because they spread thin. The consulates, they don't have resources. Something very important, Rebecca, and I leave this in the border, and this is something that I'm sure Meredith has seen it. López Obrador, he decided to turn his back to the NGO community. The NGO community and the religious groups in the border, they the heroes regarding migration flows. They the one who basically manage the shelters for migrants. So, I mean, my advice to them is you really have to embrace NGOs and religious groups, because they really the ones who make the difference. They really know how to deal with migrants. And so I hope they will do that, because otherwise it will be a mess and there's going to be a lot of suffering. And finally, I believe yesterday I published, I was presenting a book that I just published about analyzing the negotiation of the USMCA. So I believe that the #1 issue for Claudia Sheinbaum is to pick up what is going to be her main battle vis-a-vis Trump. And I believe her main battle should be the revision of the USMCA. So for that, she should really create a very good team that is not there yet and make that her priority. And I hope she will do that, because that's essential. Michael Camiones was already asking there, because yes, Jared Kushner was a wonderful back channel for Peña Nieto's administration, and he helped a lot to negotiate the USMCA. I believe that we badly need to communicate with Trump. Perhaps there should be a Mexican that knows the new chief of staff, this woman Willis, that I believe she's tough, and Trump really trusts her. Or we should really try to get a hold of the new USTR. I don't think Marco Rubio will play that role. But yes, it would be wonderful if we could get someone to communicate directly to Trump. That will help us a lot. So, I mean, this is a big challenge for Claudia Sheinbaum, but I believe this is also an opportunity for Sheinbaum. I would say Trump 1.0 gave an opportunity to Peña Nieto to redeem himself, and he did it, because he renegotiated NAFTA, and we ended up with the USMCA, which is wonderful for Mexico. And I believe that Claudia Sheinbaum should really, this could help Claudia Sheinbaum to left no doubts that she's in charge of Mexico. And I believe this could really help her to just lessen the doubts that she's not in charge, and that López Obrador continues to be in charge, or that at least, and then I can see some battle within Claudia's cabinet, some part of the cabinet being more closer to the business persons, more open to foreign affairs. So I believe this could help that, I would say, modern part of Claudia Sheinbaum cabinet, because this is a challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity for her.
Thank you. This I want to end. We're almost out of time, but I want to end on a kind of a positive note, and it's something that, I mean, at the Inter-American Dialogue, we're trying to think in terms of also what are the opportunities in Trump 2.0. For Mexico, for the hemisphere, for bilateral relations, because we all know, we've gone over the potential challenges. And we know how unique the U.S. Mexico relationship is, how interdependent our two nations are. So do you see opportunities to, where do you see the opportunities? Where are the potential bright spots? I mean, we've talked a lot about supply chain integration. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on opportunities.
Wow, that's tough. You're surprising me. I mean, I would say I see an opportunity because Trump is so challenging to Mexico that could really reunite us Mexico. I believe that, I mean, for example, Claudia Sheinbaum, she could really establish a Mexico team regarding the USA. For example, usually for the trade negotiations, we create the next, el cuarto de junto, the next room that is basically composed by business persons. I believe this time around, they should have people knowledgeable about migration, people knowledgeable about drug trafficking. Why I am saying this? Because Trump basically uses tariffs to play against immigration. So, I mean, I believe Claudia is about to establish this group of Mexicans that really help her to put together, I would say, a wonderful response for Trump challenges. That would be my take. And again, this is so powerful that this is a possibility for her to show leadership, and I'm sure she has the potential to do it, and I hope she will do it.
You know, it's interesting. There's comments in the Q&A. I think that's something that some of the audience is pointing out, is the role of, you know, we've talked about the business community, but also civil society, academia, all of these different sectors. But let me turn to you, Claudia, and then Mary Beth on this issue of opportunities.
I would say that it is an opportunity for Mexico to abandon once and for all the way we react to what happens in the United States. And I think it is, and talking about what you just said, it's always been a challenge, and we've always talked about how Mexico needs to create a different narrative in the United States and sort of be able to articulate and activate a network of allies that we have in terms of how to help the broader American public understand that Mexico is not only is today an important partner, ally, and for the United States, both in terms of the US's economic competitiveness and growth, but also in terms of security and competitiveness going forward. So the phrase that how do we show them and make them understand that Mexico is not the problem but part of the solution, I think it's still what we need to get, you know, our heads around and think straight about implementing a broader multi-level strategy, ongoing strategy that you know requires a lot of effort. Understanding that the relationship is not only bilateral in terms of governments, but it's binational because we share a border, because we share the same, are part of the same chains of production and value, and that the security issues, migration issues need to be seen from a much more regional perspective. And in that sense, and it happened to us in 2016, it's happening today again to Mexico and to President Sheinbaum's government. We find that every 4, 6, 8, 16 years, we're back to square one in terms of the U.S. sees Mexico as part of the problem, not part of the solution. The American people in general don't understand how their well-being, security, and future is linked to a much, you know, more fine understanding of the bilateral integration and dynamic. And we always go back to square one. So we need to keep a much more broader, comprehensive agenda, multi-level, multi-actor, not only government actors, and of course the business community in Mexico and in the United States is key for this, but also state governments, county and city governments, like you said, the cultural community, the education and academic community. And I think we've failed in these past 34 or 5 years on making sure that people in the US and Mexico and Canada as well understand better this relationship as an important, strategic, and necessary relationship. So I think that would be one opportunity. We really get, working on this, and on a much more tangible sense, I think probably, and it's going to probably sound counterintuitive, but maybe it's an opportunity to start talking about immigration from a different perspective, in terms of not the immediate thing of deportations or not, but thinking more in the long-term view, and starting a different kind of dialogue and looking at immigration, or not immigration as immigration, but how do we manage better the human resources that we have as a region, and creating new, avenues of cooperation and a different approach to immigration policy in the US, in Mexico, and how we manage the flows jointly from a regional perspective.
Claudia, thank you for that masterful answer. I think that's what I was in part trying to get at. So often in the United States, we look at not just Mexico, but the region as just challenges, problems, instead of looking at the opportunities. So I really appreciate that. I want to turn to Mary Beth and then Rafael as the host, UC San Diego as the host to close us out.
I know we're running out of time, so I'll just say one quick thing, which is that security cooperation really deteriorated under AMLO. So I would say I see an opportunity here for both sides to actually do more. I don't think it's going to be any sort of profound look at how to solve the drug problem and the criminal violence problem in Mexico, but I do think there could be more cooperation in, with Trump emphasizing this theme and obviously posing certain threats.
Thank you, Rebecca, for sharing this. I love to do more things with the Inter-American dialogue, and you did a beautiful job. Thank you, Mary Beth, for sharing your knowledge and your thoughts with us. And Claudia, you did beautifully. Thank you all, and thank you all for being with us. We'll see you next month. And there's plenty of things we have to discuss, and we appreciate that you tune in at these webinars organized by COMEXI and the Center for U.S. Mexican Studies at UC San Diego. Gracias, un abrazo a todas. Bien hecho. Bye.